All right, it says it's on air. So,
Wow.
and my
So
phone
we're
made a notification, so it's probably it says I'm subscribed to myself. So,
oh well.
okay,
That's you've got at least one subscriber then who's very dedicated and has like all the alerts set up and everything. That's good. Yeah, so we're live, huh? So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about Stranger Things and then maybe touch on Life Debt a little bit.
was that I was getting feedback. All right, everything's still fine.
Yep. It's all good on
Okay,
this end.
okay. Yeah, sorry, I had the home screen for it, so I was getting our conversation about like 3 seconds later.
Nice.
All right, so yeah, I guess technically this is a collaboration.
Yeah, technically, I guess it is. So we're experimenting here with Sterling Knight Gamers YouTube channel, getting this nice station, and then hopefully going to try to get the audio and splice it up for a couple podcast episodes of the World Map too. So, and I saw you guys launched your Patreon, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't think we have anyone on it, but I figured, what the hell, I'll put it up.
Yeah,
If
well,
someone sends me money, they send me
yeah.
money.
Even if you get like one guy at $5 a month, that's a latte.
Yeah, well, especially since like the YouTube ad revenue is like unless you're not making a huge amount of money. Like, I still haven't paid for one of my base games yet, especially some of the more expensive stuff.
Yeah. I
But
think I check my Google ad revenue like twice a year, and I think it's usually sitting at like $40 for the whole year or something.
yeah,
So cool. So I guess we're going to talk about Stranger Things and maybe touch on Life Debt a little bit. So maybe we should start off with Stranger Things since you just
I
binge watched.
binged it. Oh yeah, it was great.
Nice. Yeah, I mean it's
I
only 8 episodes, so
Yeah.
I mean I think it only took me 2 or 3 days as well.
Yeah, so I watched the first like 5 minutes, and then I got interrupted. And then the next day I played one episode, and then the next day I played all of them. Like throughout the course, like it wasn't like all at once. Like it'll be like more, like, I binged it like only a laid off person can. Watched a few in the morning, did some stuff because that was essentially my job that day, was to go through that show, and I definitely really enjoyed it. And it's a perfect mix of just different things, definitely E.T. and Goonies. Like
Yeah.
that's definitely 100% like intentional call on. And I got a little bit of Fringe. I don't know if you ever watched that show.
Yeah, a little. Yeah, to me it was I compared it definitely to Goonies. I mean, I think having like the young cast kind of going on this adventure type thing definitely played to that a lot. And then I also compared it to the X-Files because it was like one of those Monster of the Week X-Files episodes, but actually playing an entire season on that, which was kind of cool. But it had the lore behind down, and I think that to me is what like kind of drew me through it, was having that consistent mystery throughout. Like, what is this other world? How does it work? Like, why is there a portal to it inside of Hawkins' lab? All that kind of stuff kept me kind of thinking throughout the whole show.
Yeah, well, that was actually something that drew a strong, like, Fringe and X-Files are very similar. Like, Fringe intentionally um, elicits aspects of the X-Files. Like, they're both Fox shows. They are very similar. And the biggest difference was I felt Fringe was more sci-fi and just hard science. And I guess, aliens are technically sci-fi too, but it's a little bit more fantastical, and obviously aliens with the X-Files. But for Fringe, everything is completely science-based, of Earth, maybe multiple Earths and like different dimensions and stuff, but there's nothing outside of Earth influencing any aspect of it. So like the different dimensions and also the girl with all these powers, like I was kind of like, it would have been a crazy connection, but like if her name was Olive or something like that, it would have been it would have been crazy.
Yeah.
Just because, so like I really enjoyed that show, and it had hints of that like different dimension, a sinister aspect of that other dimension that's unknown. You don't know why is it different. They didn't have like such an explicit, evil version but just the look of it was really cool, of just how it really was the shadow dimension that they were able to connect with the kids. Yeah, it was a great show. I really enjoyed a lot of aspects of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just at an overall level, I think we'll probably want to discuss story a little bit and get a little spoilery. But before we like have to throw the spoiler warning out there, like just overall, I think it was an enjoyable show because it focused on a few things. Like one, it actually showed like the kids, the teenagers, and the adults, and they all had a consistent story throughout and its time on each. So I feel like normally a show that's like this kind of sci-fi doesn't get the broad appeal and all the like hype that this has been getting on social media and on the
Yeah,
news and stuff.
definitely.
And I think being a Netflix original series and them having quite a bit of success with their other original series to date helped with that. Some helped maybe get people interested, but I think that multi-generational approach through the character development that they did helped it out a lot. And then the other thing being that I don't know, it had, like you said, it was kind of a little more grounded in like reality at first, and I think it kicked the like sci-fi stuff up very slowly, and it was kind of like a
Yeah.
slow burn until the last few episodes. There were
But
elements of a horror film in there too, in
mhm.
some cases, which was I think probably familiar for people. So I think just the overall, it's almost like its own kind of genre. Some of the stuff that they threw together here, and a lot of the '80s callbacks. I mean, it was watching a show from that era, but with modern character development and storytelling, I think.
One aspect that I like is that, yeah, the sci-fi was definitely building as it grew, but they stayed consistent within the world that they set up.
Hmm.
Even though the powers were growing and different aspects of it, but they were consistent of what this thing is, what can it do, how does it move through, how do her powers work? Like they didn't. I don't think they did anything that suddenly be like, oh, that doesn't make sense for what they've already established. I don't think LSD to a fetus could do all that, but you never know. um, but it was definitely. Oh, I guess that's a little spoilery. But yeah, it stayed. It had a good tone, and it didn't have like the plot holes and just the jumps in logic that a lot of the shows similar to this kind of fall into. Like it felt intellectually consistent. And
Yeah, I definitely agree. Although, I guess if I had to pick one thing at it, it would be sort of the way that Eleven's powers work. I don't know if I have like a good understanding of how it grew over the course of it, or exactly what the limits of them are, because I kind of was like, oh, if she can like snap a guy's neck that's trying to put her in her cell, like why doesn't she just do that all the time, when
well,
they're on the run from people? Or she like, did she like flip a van or something, and like, and then at the end, and this is getting into spoiler territory, of course, but I mean, she basically just like, I don't know, white hot stares into the Demogorgon and destroys it. Presumably survives that. I'm like, so like, I don't know, like, how does that
well,
work?
in terms of her powers, I think when she snapped the guy's neck, I think that was just totally I don't even think she intended to do that. Like, I think she just snapped and she lost control of her own powers, and then she did that.
Yeah.
Now, I was kind of curious because how would I'm assuming a very sheltered girl would even know to snap someone's neck. Pushing someone into a wall and just obliterating them, that I could see someone doing. But like when she snapped the neck, I would think that almost had to be an accident of just she pushed one aspect of his body and not the other. But the snapping of the neck thing, but when the one guard that she slammed forward and the other one that I was definitely under the impression that she was angry and she was scared and it just snapped. And then she didn't intend to have that happen.
Yeah.
And as her powers grew, she was just probably getting more confident, as well as a desire to protect her friends that she's never had before. So that could just be drawing into like a deeper emotional draw from her powers, that she's more motivated because these are people that she cares about. Just like when the two boys were fighting in the junkyard, she reacted really strongly. She probably didn't intend to push them as hard as she did, but I'm sure she was probably having an emotional response of like, her best friend was being attacked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the character reminds me a lot of an all-new X-Men Jean Grey. I mean,
yeah.
She's figuring out the limits of her kind of telekinesis, and then I guess she goes full-on Phoenix Force at the end on the Demogorgon. But how does that work at the very end of the show? The Egos being put out presumably for 11 in the Force there. I mean, none of the other characters were like obsessed, so and we know that the sheriff, he got in that vehicle at the end, so he went off and learned something about her fate. I'm presuming knows that she's somehow still alive, maybe in the Upside Down, but presumably,
Yeah.
I guess she's able to still cross over somehow, though, if he's leaving like these snacks out.
Yeah.
Up for like what's next, and it kind of left me
Season
scratching
2.
my head like okay, so what happened to her exactly at the end there?
I was kind of under the impression that she pushed her and the Demigod like back into the Shadow Realm, and maybe she's trapped there because she never went into the realm physically. She was just kind of like a mental projection.
Yeah.
It was only so that was probably a jump in her powers of actually being able to send herself and the demon physically into the other realm. So maybe she hasn't figured out how to come back yet.
Yeah. So maybe he's leaving out the snacks in case she figures out, like maybe they told him that she's keeping it at bay, but she's trying to find a way back out. I don't know. I guess we'll find out in season 2, but I think if they handle that whole thing with her powers correctly and they build on the lore, like they may go a completely different direction for season 2, but I kind of want them to build on the lore of the Upside Down, and I want to know more about it, like because right now all we really know is somehow these kids playing D&D like summoned this thing in some alternate universe.
No,
Maybe it's just a coincidence.
It's totally a coincidence. Because the show start. No, the show does start out with them playing, but the stuff with the girl and them trying to make contact with the other side, the government was completely doing that on its own. It was total coincidence. There's no way that the boys summoned it.
Yeah.
Because it showed up in the lab. A lab that they had already experimented in and sent people in before.
Yeah.
Because he was trying. Yeah, it's definitely.
So
and the experiments with her had happened long prior because she was having flashbacks of them.
Definitely. So they basically, it's just kind of a coincidence then that so one of two things, either coincidence that there's like this D&D character, the Demogorgon, who's based on something that actually exists in the reality of the show. Um, they could have just kind of given it that name because that's the point of reference they had for it. Because
Yeah.
if you look at the actual creature and then you look at the Demogorgon in D&D, it's like a two-headed thing. It's not this faceless like
Right.
demon thing. So maybe it is or isn't, but for sake of argument, maybe it is. And in D&D, the Demogorgon is like the prince of the demons or whatever. There's a lot of cool stuff they could do with that kind of story.
Well, only the boys called it the Demogorgon, and then maybe some of the other ones later on. But it's not like the people in the government lab were like, "All right, we gotta catch this Demogorgon." Like, it's like only the boys called it that, and I think they only called it that because their friend was in the process of battling it and had lost to it. And he goes missing the next day in the woods, like in a similar scenario. Like, it's definitely a coincidence that they were playing D&D. Like it was just highlighting the parallels, but it definitely wasn't one caused the other in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's a government experiment run amok.
So is it a government experiment? Like, did Hawkins somehow create that rip in the two dimensions, or did they locate it and then build the lab around it to study it?
11 caused it because so remember, like she like stumbled across this other dimension, and then she saw this creature, and then she ran away scared. And then they were like, we want to make contact with this thing because, scientifically that's crazy to be able to have interdimensional communication. It just happened to be with a monster. Bad luck. And so she was screaming, and then there was that crack while she was screaming in the wall, and then suddenly, like, that's where the creature was coming from. And that was like a permanent like tear because they were, able to send people in those suits in afterwards. So they had her initiate contact and approach it. And then I guess that kind of alerted it to our dimension. And so it started hunting and tearing things up in the lab, and they were sending people in. So it's definitely a government experiment run amok. Like that's really the genre of it.
It also kind of like makes her character even more tragic, right? That she's the one responsible for like creating this rip and for bringing all this on to everybody, and it kind of helps you see a little bit deeper into like why she sort of acts the way that she acts. So that's, I don't know. It's interesting.
Said, like, I'm the monster.
Yeah, that's true. So I wonder, maybe season 2 we see her like some kind of effort around trying to close the crack. Maybe the government wants to keep it open and continue some kind of studies. I think I was reading an interview with the creators, and I'm blanking on the name of that guy, but that lead guy that she called Papa, they haven't really confirmed that the monster definitely killed him. I mean, we saw it kind of like the screen kind of cuts away, right. So there's possibility that he could come back as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. I think probably the most tragic part of the story, though, is that Nancy still ends up with Steve.
Yeah, that was a weird love triangle, as well as just like her romantic aspect. Like, yeah, like Steve's whole character could have been cut.
Yeah,
she could have just been a moody older sister, and like, yeah, I guess a small criticism. Yeah, it's like if they had cut the whole Steve love aspect and like them having sex and going to the party, like that all could have been either just a generic high school party. It's like like that was a weird aspect of it because they definitely were drawing on, but the fact that he actually came back and helped them rather than just being like the cowardly like boyfriend that just like runs away, or he runs away and he gets eaten, like the fact that they kept him alive and had him like actually come back and help, they were trying to give him a little bit of arc. But yeah, he was definitely a weaker character that if they had just written him out, I wouldn't have cared.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, though, with Barb, I think the entire internet cared, and she had almost no character development. But there's like people are like really angry that she's not back.
Have you seen the Jimmy Fallon thing?
Yes, I have.
Oh my god, it's so true.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
It's
no
pretty
one
funny.
was looking for like
Well,
like,
I mean, they did like try to find her car and stuff, right? And it's not
but
like they totally ignored the fact she was missing, but I don't know. Yeah, when they go into the Upside Down, I mean, they clearly show that she's beyond saving. Like she's cocooned up, like probably dead. Like she, even though Will had the like thing inside of his mouth and whatnot, like he was clearly like more salvageable than she was because he was like holed up in his little pretend fort the whole time. And
yeah.
um,
But maybe she was just in that cocoon thing too. But yeah, but yeah, the Barb's Jimmy Fallon thing was hilarious, and it was definitely dead on of just how inconsistent it was, as well as like how bad of a friend she was. Because think about it, her car was there. She knew that her car had been left there abandoned. So she knew from that point on something terrible had happened. Still went to school, like, continue to live on. Didn't immediately tell the police. And of course, like the car was found later, but she never told anyone. I actually found the car the next day someplace else. Someone moved it. Just like, Barb.
Oh, Barb. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, she's another one that sounds like they're being iffy on. Maybe they'll bring her back or something. I think, like, based on the fan
Have
reaction
her
now,
be
they
the
might.
villain.
Yeah, I mean, maybe she gets like some kind. There's like a dark Barb because she stays in there for so long. I don't know, but
Well, who knows what that thing down their throat was doing? Maybe it's almost like a xenomorph. Like that's how they reproduce almost. So just like maybe it was
maybe the
incubating
Demogorgon
in
used
it.
to be human.
That would explain why it looked kind of humanish.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, whatever even though they got Will out of there, whatever it did to him obviously did some permanent, long-lasting damage because we get that scene at the end where he goes
Coughs up some big jelly.
yeah, he goes into the bathroom and like coughs up this like like a cockroach centipede hybrid to me or something. I don't know. It's weird.
It reminded me of like it just looked like a jam or like a fig jelly, just like with seeds in it.
Yeah.
And like I understand, like he's scared and he just wants to move on. I'd be like, you know what, Mom? Can I have a stomach pump? Like I don't want to alert anyone, but I just had a flashback in the other universe.
Well, you can't pump out darkness though. It's just kind of going to keep oozing out. And
Well, I kind of think that it was just like, because they pulled that long thing out. Who knows if there wasn't some goo attached to that had spat out, or eggs, or, whatever xenomorph larva was in there. I was like, Mom, I want a stomach pump. I want some lab tests run on me. Some blood work would be good. I mean, yeah,
Well,
maybe he's like distrustful of like authority figures and stuff like that, but like, wouldn't you be so terrified of going back there? Like, what? You had that flash and that you were there on the other side. If there was a chance that you were going to be pulled back in permanently, don't you think you would, tell your mom, tell your friends?
I think
too.
Sure, that's one way to look at it. But I also got this vibe that like he and I thought it was really interesting actually that they did it this way because I got this vibe that he was like very aware of what his mom went through, throughout the course of the story, and how like tragic it was for her, and how, I mean, it really like mentally like kind of ripped her apart. And I think Winona Ryder, kudos to her. I mean, she did a great job of portraying that part. I mean, it was so believable, and just the, you know, when the phone would ring or the lights would flicker, like the desperation that she projected was just so telling. And so I think that's kind of like a little bit of it was he's kind of being the, and like doesn't want to like worry her anymore because they're finally sitting down for this meal as a family. Everything's happy, and I think he like doesn't want to ruin that moment. And maybe he's just gonna see like maybe my crazy toothless friend and all these other kids that I hang out with can help me figure this out. I don't have to like bother my mom with it. Maybe I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But
yeah, well, like part of it was is like this very teenage thing of just, you know, just hiding the evidence and just like, you know, to like, you know, so many, you know, just, you know, like and you know, like hearkening on just like puberty and like being in the bathroom and just like, you know, like discovering something. And then, but it's like, as like the water resource engineer in me, don't put this like strange foreign body down in the public water system. If there's some terrible outbreak that comes, we don't know what that's. It looked like seeds to me. It's like that could. I don't know if anyone else had that feeling. It could just because I deal so much with water and public water and stuff like that. That was like, oh man, he should not have done that.
So maybe season 2 is just there's an outbreak of Demogorgons everywhere because of the seeds he flushed.
That's right.
Oh man!
You know, you don't flush your alligators down the toilet. You don't flush Demogorgon seed down the sink.
Don't flush the noted. So yeah, so I mean, I'm glad we're getting a season 2. Obviously, as with all things Netflix, it sucks waiting an entire year to binge watch it all again in a day. But I think there's a lot of promise for season 2. I got a feeling. You know, I just hope that there's a consistent thread, and like they keep teasing us with new unexplained things, but they explain some of the previous things. You know, I hope we don't end up in some weird like Lost universe where
polar bears start showing up.
Explained. So yeah, I mean, maybe there will be polar bears. Who knows?
Part of me actually kind of wanted this second season to just be an anthology of what they tried to do with True Detective before but you know, just have it almost be like a Twilight Zone mini season for like each one, like it you know, just an isolated story, maybe a thread that goes through them, like maybe they all have to deal, like maybe if they all are related to these LSD experiments, you know, that would be enough of a through line that, you know, there's another lab in another location with another child. Maybe even goes into a different dimension. Or another strange thing happens with them. Now, I really like these characters. But one problem with dealing with child actors is like they're only going to be this cute, fun stage for a brief period of time. And then there's going to be like moody, angsty teenagers like any other kind of show. So like I think I would have actually preferred, as much as I want to learn more about these characters and their interactions, I kind of wanted this season to just be this season and do the season 2 with new characters, different place, different location, and have it be maybe no through line at all. Maybe it's just like a Twilight Zone thing.
Yeah, I mean, the way that it's set up, it very well could turn out to be that way.
I think it is connected because like the titles, like the boy who like the boy that came back from the dead or something like that. Like they even showed that newspaper clipping that said that. So
yeah,
I think they're talking about the same characters.
Well, and maybe it was planned to not be, but I think just the overwhelmingly positive response to these actors, whoever did the casting for the show, needs like 5 raises. I mean, these kids were like perfect together and just like so fun to watch. So I think there's almost a guarantee we'll see them coming back for as long as they can make money off of them. But yeah.
Yeah. Their parents just go ahead and quit your jobs now. You're fine.
Yeah. Well, maybe Dusty will have teeth in season 2.
Yeah, that was
So, before we switch on, there was one other thing, which is I want to see more from the science teacher in season 2.
oh
If they keep in this world, I think, because that whole scene where he's explaining the flea on the tightrope concept to the boys. I don't know. He just seems like he's kind of like the cool teacher that knows a little bit more about what's going on in these other universes. And it would be kind of cool to see an arc with him. Maybe he helps them out again and helps them like figure out some problem or get to the other dimension or something like that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him. Well, one, except for the sheriff and the mom, almost every adult character is a complete idiot.
Yeah.
So that the teacher was a great character, and you're right, he was a good role model because he spoke with them like in a respectful tone. He honored their questions and their curiosity. He definitely knew more than what any random middle school science teacher would know about like the different dimensions and mathematical theories. And he even knew about Dungeons and Dragons himself, because when they mentioned the Shadow Realm, he was like, oh yeah, it's like he talked about it. So he's definitely one of those kids grown up. Like he lived a very similar life that they did. And yeah, he was a cool character, and who knows, whoever he was having that date with watching The Thing, which is definitely, there are multiple references to The Thing, because one of the boys have it in their room as well as them watching it in there. But it was definitely, I want to see more of that character. If we go back to the same place, same locations, yeah, definitely include the science teacher more, and maybe kill the one guy's dad, who's just a complete idiot.
You mean the dad with his like extremely large glasses and
Yeah,
just sitting at the table?
I think we would know if there was someone living here for a week. Like, no, you wouldn't, because you're oblivious idiots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess like I don't know. Do they never ever go into the basement for anything? It's just
Yeah, like did
this whole thing's
someone do
weird.
laundry at some point?
Yeah, that was a little. I guess that's one of the less bullet points, but yeah, maybe I don't know. I mean, I have a shed that I don't go in but once a month, so.
I hope you don't have an 11-year-old girl locked up in there. You gotta get a whole new.
I gotta actually I gotta go check something before this goes live on the internet real quick. Oh man.
Yeah, I guess you could have like hidden in that like blanket fort that they had set up, but yeah, but that's one of these like kid-centric show things, is like the parents have to be idiots. They have to be incompetent, because otherwise, it's like no superhero ever has parents. It's like the hero's journey. Like everyone is an orphan, because if you could just run to competent parents to help you, it's not so extraordinary. If they were like, hey, there's this girl downstairs, and like their dad or mom would have been awesome. It's like, oh yeah, let's figure this out. Like it wouldn't have been a kid's journey. So parents either have to be dumb or dead in order to have a good child adventure tale.
Or you got to have a really cool aunt and a dead uncle that gets shot.
Well, yeah, exactly. No, what happens is you have a really friendly, wise uncle, and then they end up dying in the second act.
Yeah, right. Man.
No, but I mean, like think about it. It's like Superman, orphan. Luke Skywalker, effectively an orphan. He's living on his own. Harry Potter, orphan. Batman, orphan. Spider-Man, orphan. Like if you have parents, you can't be a superhero. It's just
yeah.
I guess the only orphan.
That's true. I guess the exception that comes to mind is maybe the Fantastic Four, but the parents were the superheroes first, and then they had don't they have two kids in like the newer comics for that? Or I don't know because I kind of hate the Fantastic Four, but I'm pretty sure they have two kids now.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I think Reed Richards and Sue Storm have two kids now. So.
Yeah, but they were. I don't know if they were orphans when like they first like. Yeah, it's like I guess if you have superhero parents, like technically The Incredibles, the best Fantastic Four movie there's been so far.
Right.
They were still alive, but yeah, if you're establishing yourself as a new superhero, your parents are probably dead.
Yeah, or if you're like Kylo Ren and you just make yourself an orphan. Speaking of Star Wars, though.
Oh, is that your segue?
Is that a good segue? I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, we both read through Star Wars Aftermath: Life Debt pretty recently. What did you think about? Well, first, what did you think about the first Aftermath book, just generally, and then kind of compared to this one?
Probably one of the most unpleasant books I've read in a really long time.
I'm right there with you. I absolutely I kind of hated the first one. Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. I was so skeptical of this one coming in.
Well, I didn't read Aftermath because I heard some of the reviews, and I had such a great, it's like, when you have a really good meal, you don't want to eat something like garbagey afterwards, even if you're curious about it. Like after Tarkin, Lords of the Sith, and Lost Stars, and Bloodlines, I'm like, I'm not gonna taint how I feel about these Star Wars books by reading Aftermath. But then when I heard that Life Debt was good and that it was the same characters, I was like, shit, I guess I'll read Aftermath. And like I mentioned this in my video review for it, but the biggest issue I had with it was just the constant fake deaths of just a chapter ends where you think a character is dead, and then 3 chapters later, they're just like, "Oh, I was fine." Yeah. I'm like, and they did it over and over and over again for the same character. At a certain point, it's like, I hope someone dies, so it is a little bit worth it. But no one dies in the first book.
I wonder if we'll see Poe Dameron pull that same thing again in episode 8. Has to be a theme in the new Star Wars.
Actually, yeah, that's kind of funny. It's like, I believe they originally intended for him to die.
Yeah, that's
and then
true.
Like later on in the production, they changed their minds.
Yeah, because they were like, "Oh wait, Oscar Isaac is awesome. We've got to keep this guy alive."
Till you cover him up with blue prosthetics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, like, my biggest problems with Aftermath were the fake deaths and just the so disjointed chapters.
Yeah.
Just when anything was getting interesting, I was like, let's go to Coruscant for 3 pages. I'm like, who gives a shit? Or like, let's go to this other place for a few pages.
Yeah, even Life Debt has the like interlude chapters that really don't add up to anything. I don't like that so much. But at least in Life Debt, they were a little more interesting. But yeah, I was just it like you said, it was a chore to read it. It was not a great introduction to these new characters, and to be honest, I don't really like these new characters that much anyway, except with the exception of Mr. Bones. I really like Mr. Bones, who's the souped up battle droid.
B1, yeah.
So, but I don't know. By the end of Life Debt, I'm liking Nora Wexley and her crew of missing a little bit better Resistance, I guess. But I think for me the problem with Aftermath was it didn't connect to the main Star Wars universe enough to keep me going through. Yeah. And what Life Debt did a really good job of was weaving these new characters in and developing them alongside Han and Leia and Chewie and Wedge and all the Mon Mothma is pretty prevalent in Life Debt. Not as much so as in Bloodline. But, you know, that parallel I think is needed. And then the other thing for me, I think my favorite part of Life Debt is what they did with the Imperials side.
Yeah.
You know, Ray Sloane's a pretty cool character, Admiral Ray
Definitely.
Sloane. But then Gallius Rax, man, this Gallius Rax guy, he's the reason that I love Life Debt. I think like that whole kind of just influence that he has throughout the story kept me super interested the whole time. Because I want to know who he is, because I have a theory, but I want to know who he ends up being.
I I kind of think he's just going to be a character just for this trilogy because he's obviously not Snoke.
Is he obviously not Snoke? So what's your thinking there?
Well, yeah, like just because Snoke appears to be so old, and this is only 30 years or 29 years before The Force Awakens. And there's no way some normal, regular Imperial after 29 years of aging, even if you get whacked in in the face a few times with a lightsaber, you're going to end up looking like that. Plus,
But what about, so think about how Palpatine looked before he Force Lightninged Mace Windu, and how much that just like one act aged him. That's kind of my level of thinking, is like something that happens with the dark side like ages Rax to the point of looking Snoke-like. His features are it's very deliberate that his features are never like super explained. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there is still a possibility he could be Snoke, and the way that he had a relationship with the Emperor, the way that he like influences Rey and some of the other splintered Imperials who are leading towards eventually becoming the First Order here, it almost seems as though he might have some sway over the Force, although it's definitely not shown.
yeah, definitely not.
But I don't know. I kind of want it to be one character out of the Force Awakens that I want like more knowledge about and more development around. So I don't know. I think it could be cool, but either way, he's a cool character.
I think it's more likely that he finds Snoke than he is Snoke. Either, some Sith, like hibernation chamber buried in Jakku.
Yeah.
Or when they go out into like the wildlands, like when they decide, like, during the Battle of Jakku, they lose. And I forget which Star Wars source, but, like from Lost Stars, we know they lose the Battle of Jakku.
Right.
And there's some other canon source that there was some kind of research facility there, and they destroyed it because they didn't want the New Republic to find what they had found in like about the planet as well as. So I think they either find Snoke there or they leave because they found some evidence pointing to Snoke, and they go off into the wild. They disappear because a lot in Bloodlines they talk about this lost Imperial fleet that they're just like there's this ghost fleet rumored. I think they go off into the wildlands, kind of like the biblical sense, the 40 years in the desert. They go 30 years into the wildlands, and they come back with this cult leader. And so, yeah, I don't think Rax is Snoke, but I think he'll find Snoke.
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff in this book. I mean, the whole way that Palpatine comes across Rax in the first place as a child is because the Empire is excavating something on the surface of Jakku, and then presumably that's still either ongoing or know what's there, because Rax takes the Imperials back to Jakku at the end of this book. So yeah, I'm thinking it's a Sith temple. There's something there of great importance to the Empire and eventually First Order. And then, like you said, obviously we know that they destroy that at some point to prevent it from falling in the hands of the New Republic. So no, it's interesting. I mean, the other thing that's cool is he ensures that they go and rescue General Hux.
Right.
This story. And so, you know, the Hux family is kind of like in this story as well and brought into play. So he's definitely, if he's not Snoke, he's definitely assembling all of the pieces of the First Order. And I think that for me is like one of the most exciting things about this book is we're seeing, you know, by The Force Awakens, the First Order is just kind of a thing, right? But we never really know how the fractured empire comes together to become the First Order, and we're starting to see those puzzle pieces in this book, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but still, it like in terms of just canon, like the amount of canon per page, I definitely think Bloodlines gave out so much more information.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, but I mean, Bloodlines to me is still a superior book for sure, as are some of the other new canon books. Lords of the Sith, you mentioned. Tarkin's very good. Dark Disciples probably my favorite of the new canon so far.
Yeah, I still haven't read that yet. I really need to go ahead and do that.
It doesn't do a lot to add to the mainstream film canon, but if you were like me and a huge fan of the Clone Wars, Dark Disciple builds on that story a lot, and we get some crossover with the Jedi Council and some of that, Obi-Wan and some of those characters. So yeah, Dark Disciple is just really well written. But yeah, I enjoyed Life Debt a lot. I mean, like I said, we got the crossover with Han and some of the other characters, and there's not maybe not as much canon per page, but there is some canon and lore being built on here, which I thought was great. There's one like little subtle thing in Life Debt that I wanted to get your opinion on, but in my view, Life Debt kind of confirms for me or makes it much more possible to me that Rey is the daughter of Han and Leia.
Yeah. Especially with Bloodlines, it was like I have I actually did a separate video on this after Bloodlines because my prior theory was Rey is Luke's daughter, period. And my original theory was that him and a Mara Jade stand-in character have a daughter. It's Rey. She's Force sensitive. They're all at the New Jedi Academy with her, I guess, cousin, Kylo Ren. I think Luke leaves maybe because of the events of Bloodline that he leaves to meet with Leia. And while he's gone, I think Kylo Ren, like that's when the massacre takes place. And my theory was that he kills everybody, maybe even including his aunt. And he can't bring himself to kill his much younger niece. Or cousin. Yeah, cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And he forced... because part of me that felt this theory was there were a lot of Knights of the Old Republic powers, force powers, they brought into The Force Awakens. Like the status field of like how he stunned people in the middle of an action. Mm-hmm. As well in that series, in the reading of the minds and extracting information... Another power that's established in the Knights of the Old Republic is force wiping someone. So I think he couldn't bring himself to kill her, but he knew that he would be called out for not doing it. So he force wiped her, left her on Jakku. Mm-hmm. And that's why they have to have a prior relationship, because when that one lieutenant or whatever is like, oh, and some girl helped him on the ship, and he's like, what? And he draws like, why would he care about some girl unless he knew
I agree.
That he left some girl on that planet?
Yeah, I agree. I think because he's like, what girl? You know, like, I mean, it's very subtle in The Force Awakens, but it's very evident that he, in the back of his mind, has some theory about who the girl is.
Right.
And for me, and so in Life Debt, the reason I started kind of leaning back towards her being the daughter of Han and Leia is Leia. I don't know if you remember in Life Debt, but there's this sequence where Leia has a dream, and she dreams she's pregnant with Ben at the time of Life Debt, but she has a dream about her son and her daughter. She dreams about having a daughter in Life Debt, and obviously that doesn't confirm that that's something that actually happens. But we know Leia's force sensitive, and so we tend to think her dreams may actually be a little more prophetic than other people's.
Did she actually have a daughter in the dream, or was it just like a girl? Like a girl with her son?
She'd go back and look up if we can find like a transcript of the book somewhere. But I definitely remember the dream saying the words son and daughter. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And so for me, I was like, oh, like knowing that she's force sensitive, this almost confirms for me that probably she ends up having a daughter at some point. And she's obviously way past childbearing age by the time of The Force Awakens rolls around. So she would have had that daughter prior to that film at some point. We know that Ben. So to me, like all those are all signs that point at it. And then I started following that like down the path a little further and thinking like, okay, let's assume that is a thing, that is true. Like what do we have that could confirm it? And I started thinking about The Force Awakens, and I was like, you know what? It's really convenient that Han and Chewie just happen to know the moment that she takes off in the Millennium Falcon and stumble upon that location.
Well, they said there was like they could track it because it had a unique signature. Like, especially if you read the novelization of the movie.
Yeah, I've read it. I agree, but it's like also like why couldn't you have tracked it while it was parked on Jakku? I don't know, like. And then we know from her flashback in The Force Awakens when she's left on the planet that she's left with Unkar Plutt. Like his arm reaches out, grabs her, right. We hear his voice. Yeah. So my theory is like maybe Han left the ship there, left her there to hide her from Kylo Ren. And maybe even at the behest of Luke, and he's actually knows who Unkar is, like has this relationship with him, and is kind of like paying him to watch her from afar and to like send him the signal if she ever gets in trouble.
Like, I think you're completely wrong. And I'll tell you why. So one, there was a series of people who stole the Millennium Falcon, and there was a link. It was like some boys, or there were like 4 people who had the Millennium Falcon since Han.
Right. I remember that.
Kumplot is only the last one.
Right.
So that definitely makes me think that the Millennium Falcon had been on many other planets, and then
is there any just confirm that other than Han saying that when he's on the ship in the movie and telling her like, oh, Unkar Plutt who got it from such and such, who stole it from me, like, do we have any other sources confirming that, or is that just like?
I mean, the novelization in the movie, but I mean, like movies are like the higher canon.
Is that just like Han deflecting though? I don't know. I mean,
but I got more. So that's that's the first thing of evidence, and then 2, if Han left her there, then he's a monster, because he left her like whoever left her there. Left her with someone that was at least sympathetic to the New Order, because as soon as they need the droid, he knows about it and he visualizes it, and he tries to take it from her. That's why I think Kylo Ren left her there, because 1, he seemed to know that there was a girl on Jakku that is of importance, and 2, he's in the New Order. She's left with someone sympathetic to the New Order. Therefore, I don't think Han Solo would. If you read the novelizations, Kumplot finds her in the Maz Kanata's castle, and Chewbacca actually rips his arm off. It's actually pretty cool, but they cut it from the movie. So he's very obviously a bad guy. It doesn't have a great term with Chewbacca and Han Solo since Chewbacca rips the guy's arm off. So, like
So
that's
okay, so I like that. I like that theory. I think that makes a lot of sense that maybe she was at the temple when the Knights of Ren wiped everybody out, and he left her there. I think that makes a lot of sense given with how he like responds in the film. But I still think that doesn't rule out that she could be Han and Leia's daughter based
no,
on Leia's
you're
dream.
right. Right. That's entirely possible.
And I also think that Han kind of like knows based on like he's given her the blaster in the film. He's treating her better than Han Solo treats anyone other than Chewie. Like Han's kind of grumpy, and he's like really nice to this girl for no reason that he just met.
Oh, but so another thing that could be true about your theory is Bloodlines takes place 6 years before The Force Awakens, right? No,
6,
20.
right?
The Lost is it 24? Oh shit. Yeah, because Ben's already. Yeah, it takes place 6 years before The Force Awakens.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, because Ben's already with Luke in Bloodlines, right? So, yeah.
Kylo Ren and Rey are 10 years apart. Like that's been stated. And I think he's 29 in The Force Awakens. So he'll be they're 10 years apart, so that all right.
So he would be 13 in Bloodlines, and then she would be 3.
9.
So she would have to have been born already by Bloodlines, theoretically.
Right. And so one thing that really messed up my whole theory about everything was the age that she appeared on Jakku in the Force flashback.
Mm-hmm.
She should already be there by the time Bloodlines happens.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, so I don't know if it's just a mistake in canon, which happens. Especially like there are definitely inconsistencies that pop up here and there. So that was one thing that really messed up my theory was how old she appears in the Force vision, because if that takes place 6 years before and she's 19 during the Force Awakens, that means she would have been 13 at the time of the Bloodlines, and it looks like she was left behind more than 6 years ago by like her appearance. So that's like a huge problem, and Ben hasn't fallen yet in like Bloodlines. So that means his fall has to take place probably immediately, I think within a few months of Bloodlines.
Yeah.
But
which would make sense because Leia is very clearly like fed up with the New Republic and off doing a rogue resistance thing.
But one thing with like Bloodlines is like she thinks about how Ben is going to react to this news. She doesn't have a single thought.
Right. Yeah, that was Ben. Ben grows up with the fact that Vader is his grandfather, hidden from him until the events of Bloodlines, which is, to me, was like a big moment that, like, to put that in that book, because it's like, oh, well, no wonder he's pissed off. like
I'm really surprised. Like, I would understand why she wouldn't tell the public, but I was shocked that her and Han would decide.
I'm shocked that Luke would.
Yeah, but and also
told
like,
him after Luke went through.
if Luke, like, do they publicly acknowledge that they're even brother and sister?
Gee, I don't know.
Or you know what? Maybe he knows that Anakin was his grandfather.
Oh, possibly.
Because it is known that Leia was adopted.
He would almost have to know Anakin is.
But most people don't know that Vader is Anakin.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a possibility. I mean, he's got to know Anakin's his grandfather. There's Republic records, and oh, by the way, Hayden Christensen Force Ghost, and like all this stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah. Oh boy, we're going a whole, that could be a whole other hour-long video.
I think that's like the signal that we're close to needing to cut this off if we start talking prequels.
Yeah, so your theory could be right that she's Han's daughter, Han and Leia's daughter. If that's true, they're both shitty parents.
Well, yeah, but if there's this like new guy who's potentially more dangerous than even Darth Sidious out there that Luke kind of knows about, possibly, like they want to hide her on the most backwater place imaginable.
So,
like I don't know if it makes them terrible parents if like. I mean, look where Luke ended up on Tatooine, right? Like that's pretty terrible too. I guess he at least had his aunt and uncle, but
well, here's my question to you: what did Han want to do to Rey the moment he met her?
Well, I don't know. He pulled a gun on her.
No, that, and he said, "Put Chewie, put him in an airlock. We'll drop like in an escape pod. We'll drop him off at the next inhabitable planet."
Yeah.
Now, if you hadn't seen your daughter in, let's say, at least 6 years, you would recognize your daughter. Only, it's just like even in the Force flashback, you can tell that that's her because like her hair is like the same way.
Oh yeah.
It's like there's a resemblance.
No, I
would hope that Han Solo would be able to recognize his own daughter,
but I don't trust
and not immediately.
Anything else says. He's a smuggler. He's a pirate. He's got the best poker face. I feel like if he wants to like give off the appearance of something to protect someone, like he could do it with no one ever knowing. He's like probably the best liar in the galaxy. So
he's pulling a Ned Stark, keeping this deep secret for their own good.
Yeah. The First Order is coming.
And also, like, so why wouldn't Leia at some point be like, "Oh, I've been missing"? And also, when like this girl goes missing and gets captured by Kylo Ren, Han doesn't like push. We need to rescue her. Like he even gets like disappointed when Finn wants to go, like he's only there to rescue her and not like the shield generator, as well as Leia doesn't seem to put like, yes, tell us about this base. We'll try to do something about her, but
yeah, no, that's a very telling point. But counter to that is the embrace that Rey and Leia have at the end of the movie. To me, that
because it's her niece.
Yeah. Maybe not daughter. I mean, maybe, but I think like I think she feels through the Force or something, some kind of connection there that's more than just some scavenger from Jakku that she just met. But so we've talked a lot about things that are actually very small pieces of, but as far as like the main story, going to try to rescue Chewie from captivity and all this stuff, and this new cast of characters: Nora Wexley, Sinjir, Snap Wexley, who goes by Timon in a lot of these books, but he's in The Force Awakens, small part. Who are the Jazz? There's this whole crew, kind of ragtag crew. They remind me a little bit of the Star Wars Rebels crew from that.
Yeah.
Animated, just this ragtag group. No Jedi though, no Force sensitive characters involved. I still don't really like them that much. I don't know. I mean, they got a little more interesting by the end of this book, I guess.
They got way better because but the first book was like pure garbage.
Yeah.
So it had to improve.
Yeah.
I care about these characters a little bit more. Like, just the bounty hunter, whether or not she hooks up with that special forces guy, I don't give a shit. Like that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing probably is that there's a former Imperial interrogation guy as part of the crew. Like that's kind of cool. And then so I listened to the audiobook of this, and so Mr. Bones was like done with the voiceover of a battle droid from the prequels.
Oh, that's cool.
And so like every time Mr. Bones was had a speaking line, I just loved it. But and of course he says like cool things like I
A
want
lot
quotes,
of
but like I want to go execute violence.
47.
Yeah. Very HK. Man, that's a deep cut. Where's Dash?
Oh yeah, by the way,
where's Dash Rendar hanging out?
well, no, for anyone who's watching this, like I believe they're working on an HD like fan remake of the Old Republic, but the Old Republic is one of the best Star Wars games, if not the best Star Wars game there's ever been. And you know, it's always been flirting with the possibility of it making, because Revan was almost canon in the Clone Wars before it got canceled. He may come back at some other point, but it's just a stellar game. And yeah, you can tell that they're drawing on this stuff.
Oh,
You know,
they're
Mr.
definitely they're not
Mr.
drawing on the old and the old expanded universe, but they're like finding ways to weave it in. I mean, Admiral Thrawn's going to be in the next season of Rebels, so maybe not in the exact same context as he was in the old universe, but that stuff's just it's too ripe for the picking and too good for them to give up on entirely.
It kind of reminds me of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, that there are, 100 years of comic books that they can just pluck from, storylines that they like, aspects that they like, and change other things that they don't like. That's essentially what Star Wars has. They have, hundreds of those 90s, 2000 novelizations that were just being cranked out. Yeah,
they're all right there.
So and some of those were really good. Some of them, like the force sensitive robot that, just, or like the X-Wing pilot that was a rabbit, is not coming back. And that's okay, because like the expanded universe wasn't all great, but there were definitely
I hope they bring back the Ewok from Wraith Squadron. That'd be pretty awesome. Well,
but yeah, so it's like I think they'll draw on it. But yeah, who's Rey's parents? I hope we can all agree we don't want it to be a reincarnation of the Force and the Chosen One, and like a rebirth of Anakin Skywalker. I think we can all agree that.
Yeah, I think that's not going to happen.
I hope not.
I don't see any. They're not going to. I don't think we're ever going to. I think that's not something that they'll put in the books either. I think that episode 8 or maybe even 9, before we find that out, like they're going to save a reveal like that for the film, I'm sure. But we gotta soldier on through Rogue One first. I'm
looking forward to Rogue One. Like, it's not going to introduce like all this crazy new canon, but the opening crawl of New Hope, the first Star Wars, like, it's a really interesting premise, and it's kind of contradicted by Rebels, because it says their first victory against the Empire, they were able to like get these battle plans. I'll hate to break it to you, this Rebels crew have been able to do a lot of things against the Empire that I would call victories, but it's like,
yeah, that's when you're the last surviving Jedi of Order 66, other than Yoda and Obi-Wan, I guess.
Yeah, well, the thing is like, I am kind of curious what happens to them, or how they adjust canon, because Yoda says, when I die, the last of the Jedi you'll be.
Yeah.
They all need to die at some point.
There's no way that Kanan Jarrus survives that long, because he's just a human anyway. But
are they? No, it's like that. Like, that's only like 20 years later.
Well, yeah. I guess he would only be, because he's probably like 30 in Rebels ish.
If that, because he was just a Padawan.
Well, and then there's Ezra, but Ezra is gonna, like, Vader's gonna kill Ezra. He's gonna like try to bring him over to the dark side and then just kill him so that he doesn't have competition. I already know that's gonna happen.
I kind of wonder if maybe he starts the Knights of Ren.
Oh,
Like, I don't know if they would explore that in a kid's show, but if they would like maybe explore that later on um
they would. I mean, I
because
think Clone Wars and
because
Rebels
like
have both gotten dark.
well the Mandalorian's clan name is Ren. I think she dies and he is like really emotional about it, and like it's possible that he establishes the Knights of Ren as a splinter group because he hates Vader. I think he's going to turn against the Jedi, and he starts this new faction that when the Empire falls, gets rolled up into the First Order. But that I don't have much like I don't have much evidence for as much as like the like Rey's parentage, but that's just kind of like a gut feeling.
It just goes to show that Disney is definitely not ruining Star Wars. Although I do miss a lot of the old expanded stuff, but
Anything that was decent, they're going to come back. I mean, if
yeah,
you're doing one Star Wars movie a year forever, and there's going to be all these canon games and book every few months and a comic book every month, they're going to pull every good aspect of the EU. It's all shield ships, the Vong. They're all eventually going to be brought back in. It may just take 10
another
years.
yeah.
But
Yep, I think we'll see a lot of it. We'll see the whole maybe the Han Solo movie will pull off of the Han Solo trilogy of
yeah,
the old books.
definitely.
So cool. All right. Well, this has been fun, man. I think
We got a good amount of material.
we got Stranger Things, we got Life Debt, and we hate all the characters, but we love. We'll see what happens
if
with the
you're
next one.
thinking about reading Life Debt or Aftermath, maybe go ahead and read it, but read Lost Stars, read Bloodlines.
Yeah, read everything else.
Yeah, it's like that should be on the bottom of your reading list.
Honestly, I would say go to Wikipedia and like read the character. Go on Wikipedia, read the character profiles for each of the new characters, so you know who they are, and then just go straight to Life Debt. Don't even bother. There's nothing of substance in there at all.
Nope.
So cool.
Maybe like who knows with Empire's End, maybe it's like, oh, that random person, that random chapter. I think Aftermath is going to be better reading a second time when it's all done rather than when you're experiencing it. It's kind of like with Game of Thrones, actually. Rereading Game of Thrones, you realize how many things they're foreshadowing. When you first read it, you don't realize.
Yeah, that's true.
That could be the same, but it's a better book to start out with. But with Aftermath, I think it could improve after you know what's going to happen.
Maybe a little, but there's no way this author is as good at what he does as George R.R. Martin.
Well, who knows? If Rax does end up being Snoke and that gets spoiled, and you're like, look, this Aftermath series is about the rise of Snoke, and then if you read it as the rise of Snoke, suddenly you may be okay with some of this like filler stuff. But if it becomes Rax as some Imperial admiral that gets killed sometime between Empire's End and The Force Awakens, then this whole series doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's true. Cool. All right, man. Well, it's been fun.
Well, anytime you want to do just talk about Star Wars canon for unlimited amount of time. But if there's anything else in the future you want to do, let me know.
Cool.
Or Game of Thrones conversation. Like, I got the map. I know my Game of Thrones pretty darn well.
Yeah, well.
So if you have any, most of the theories have already been like this last season, kind of like, oh, R plus L plus is J that nerds have been talking about for the last 10 years. Oh yeah, don't worry.
When it takes like 10 years between stories to get released, people figure.
Yeah,
I just really hope that George R. R. Martin doesn't die, because he like looks like he could die at any moment.
that is true. He has given the show writers like the gist of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think it's the first show in history where the TV show finally like surpassed its source material. So
well, there was this interview, like this is a whole other, but there was this interview with George R. R. Martin during season 1, and Dance of Dragons had just come out, which is the 5th book, and he had that like 6 years or 7 years before A Feast of Crows and Dance with Dragons, even though they were supposed to be one book, and he said he was 80% done when Feast of Crows came out, which was so frustrating because like actually when I read I got the Amazon that was all 5 books in one gigantic Kindle file that's like 100,000 like Kindle pages. It's absurd. Like I would read for like hours. It'll be like 1% higher because it considered all the books the same. But at the end of Feast of Crows, he's like, "Yo, I'm almost done with Dance of Dragons. I hope to have it out by the end of the end of the year." And I'm like, what the hell was he talking about? Like it took 7 years for it to come out. But he was in an interview during season 1 was coming out, and he was saying like, well, I'm almost done with Winds of Winter. It's probably going to take me another year or 2 to do that, and then I'll do the next book 2 or 3 years after that one, and then I'll be done. And 6 years later, he hasn't done Winds of Winter yet, and so obviously he's entirely hopelessly behind. And he was like really adamant that like, yeah, I'll be able to get the books out before, because he knew by that point that seasons 2 and 3 were both going to be book 2. But yeah, it's so bad for the people that started reading Game of Thrones in the 90s. I can't imagine, because so much of this lore, like all the R plus L stuff, R plus L equals J theory stuff, like 70% of that information gets revealed in book 1.
Yeah.
Because book 1 was supposed to be a trilogy, so it gave a third of the like secrets and lore away, and then it got stretched out. So people since the 90s have, sorry, there was a fly by me. Since the 90s, people have been, who's Jon Snow's parents? What's up with Daenerys? Like, what's going to happen? Like, all these characters were introduced in the 90s, and those fans are still waiting. Luckily, I can only complain so much since I didn't start reading until after the first season aired.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's about when I read them. So, oh man. Well, let's just hope and pray he doesn't croak, or that there's someone lined up to finish them.
He said he doesn't want someone else to finish them.
Oh.
Like he wants the show to continue on, but he doesn't want anyone else to do the books.
We'll be left to just make videos trying to hypothesize.
But they may offer.
Oh, it was Jon Snow's parents were Han and Leia all along.
Yeah, I am curious about Rey's parentage, and I think no matter what, there's going to be some inconsistencies. Like if she's Leia and Han's kids, then they're like really terrible at recognizing faces, and if it's Luke's kid, it makes a little bit more sense because he thought that she was dead, and that maybe that's one reason why he goes off into hiding, because he failed that spectacularly. But even if that's true, then the timing doesn't work, because she looks like she's too young to have not already been on Jakku and during the time of Bloodlines, and no one's mentioning like, oh, I just sent a birthday holovid to, my niece who's turning 10 today. Like, it's just, you would think, since there's so much talk from Leia's point of view of her brother and of her son, you would think that another family member would have been mentioned. And like, especially if her other daughter or her niece was there at the Jedi Academy too, it would be a big reveal for her as well that Vader was her grandfather. But she doesn't give a shit about her either. So I think no matter what, there's going to be, like, unfortunately, the way they set this up, I think no matter what they do, there's going to be a little bit of an inconsistency, with, like, probably in the books. Like, I don't know if Bloodlines was supposed to originally be more years prior, and there was just a miscommunication, or like the casting, they chose a girl that looks younger, or she has some kind of growth disease at first that makes her appear a different age. But I think no matter what, there's going to be
maybe
and it wouldn't be the first plot hole. The fact that Leia says she remembers her mom. I'm like, oh, really? You remember your mom for the 5 seconds you were held by her on that blockade run before she died? And then, like, she appeared set. Like, you remember all of that as a baby? So
the Force works in mysterious ways, I hear.
I guess so. And Luke didn't pick up on any of that. So
he's busy.
Well, either way, I know you're trying to wrap this up, so I really enjoyed it. We probably need a whole separate one on Game of Thrones and Star Wars canon and stuff like that, because apparently we can get lost down that track.
Indeed. Cool. All right, man. Well, may the Force be with you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.